Hey everybody, it's Caroline with Caroline's Veggies. I'm here to talk about some things that you might be interested in regarding tomatoes. Now tomatoes, it's just my ultimate favorite vegetable or fruit, whatever you'd like to call it. But it just really, I think in my mind, the backbone of many cultures around the world, if not the backbone definitely of America, since we're a melting pot. But when you think about tomatoes, they're really in almost everything we eat. So pasta sauce, salsa, when you make a beef stew, you usually put tomatoes in there. You slice up tomatoes and put them on your sandwich, in salads, tomato mozzarella salad. I mean, there's so many different things. I could go on and on and on about what you could use tomatoes for. And, you know, I mean, there's nothing more America that says that. I mean, if not corn or apple pie, but tomatoes really, in my mind, make me think of a summer here in the Midwest. But I wanted to go over a couple things I wrote down in my notebook that you might be interested in or didn't know, and some of the things I learned this year. But the first thing I want to go over is the difference between heirloom tomatoes and hybrid tomatoes. Now, heirloom really seems to be the in thing right now. Now, heirloom tomatoes, they're going to be what are called open pollinators. They're not genetically modified or anything like that. They actually are really tastier, and they come in a multitude of colors, from green, actually when they're ripe, not when they're unripe, and green, yellow, orange, striped, purple, blue, I mean pink. There's a plethora of different colors with heirloom tomatoes, and they're actually usually more flavorful. And then the hybrid tomatoes are going to be ones that are grown by man mostly. They didn't actually develop until the 1920s. I believe it was the Big Boy or the Better Boy. That's the one they started off with. But these are grown to resist many diseases that affect tomatoes. So it's actually a great tomato as well. I'm also growing hybrid tomatoes in the garden. So I also want to go over the difference between indeterminate tomatoes and determinate tomatoes. Now, this is something that I actually never really paid attention until this year. I just never thought about it because I, gardened a fairly large plot, but, it's something that I really had any, that I cared about because it wasn't a business to me, it was just a hobby. So indeterminate tomatoes, those are going to be the tomatoes that you mostly find in seed packets or in the stores. Those are the ones that are going to keep flowering and flowering all summer long until October, when you get your first frost. They also, most of the indeterminate tomatoes are going to go upward. They're going to go vertically. They're not going to grow out. So really, you have to be really diligent, in my opinion, of pruning the indeterminate tomatoes. Otherwise, they get really out of hand and you're wasting space when you could just be growing them vertically. And those are the ones that need really, long bamboo stakes like I have back here. The determinate tomatoes, like I said, they didn't really come up until recently, and they look identical, so it's really hard to tell the difference between, it's impossible to tell the difference between an indeterminate or determinate by just looking at them when they're seedlings. But there's a genetic component to the determinate tomatoes that stunts their growth and doesn't allow them to go upward. It only allows them to go out. And those are the kind of tomatoes that you're going to want to put in those tomato cages that you see at Menards or Home Depot. And they only flower once a season, and they're not going to, not once a season, but they're going to flower like I don't know, like a mulberry bush, or like your blueberries or tulips. They're only going to blossom during a certain period of time, and then they're done. And they're not going to keep going and going and going until the frost kills them. So if you're looking to make tomatoes a business, then you really want the indeterminate tomatoes, because you can maximize your output, because you're going to keep getting tomatoes until it gets cold out, until it frosts. And that's something that I should have researched before. Unfortunately, I have tons of Roma tomatoes that are determinate tomatoes, and so they will not give me fruit all summer into October, which is too bad, but I learned my lesson. The other thing I want to go over is diseases and problems that you can have with your tomatoes. Now, tomatoes, you really have to pay attention to them. I heard an expression of, one woman said on a YouTube video, you got to treat a tomato like she's your main lady, your girlfriend. You got to give her attention every day, otherwise she can, go south. So that's true. I have to tend to all these vegetables, really, but in particular tomatoes. You need to make sure you need to prune them, but you gotta be careful not to over prune them. You gotta always look at their leaves and see what's going on. So if you notice that your leaves on your tomatoes on the bottom are turning yellow, that's very common. It could be that you're getting, it's a sign of early blight, which is a fungus. So what you want to do is cut those leaves that are yellow off, and if the leaves have spots on them as well, you're going to want to cut those leaves off as well, because that's an indication of a fungus. It doesn't mean that you're going to lose your tomato plant at all. Just get those leaves off and throw them away, so the fungus can't spread. Another thing that's really common is blossom end rot. And that is something that, honestly, it's really hard to tell if this is blossom end rot that affected some of my big boy tomatoes, or if it's another term which is called cat facing. And cat facing creates leather looking cracks in your tomatoes, which can be something genetically, but that's in the tomato, or it could be from overwatering or too high in nitrogen. So I'm not really sure, honestly, what this is. It's only hit about 5 of my green tomatoes, and you can kind of see it. It's kind of weird looking. So I'm not really sure, honestly, like I said, if this is blossom end rot or cat facing. But either way, if you have this on your tomatoes, you need to toss it right away. Just throw them out. They're not salvageable. And a lot of times with the larger tomatoes, which this is a big boy tomato, these plants, for whatever reason, are prone to cracking and blossom end rots. And so if you don't even want to deal with this at all, although many people like these because they're great for slicing and for sandwiches and your mozzarella, your caprese salad, so these are very popular. But there is a way to fix the blossom end rot and cat facing. So for the cat facing, the problem is that your soil is too high in nitrogen, and it could be that you are too aggressively pruning it. However, I mean, that could be because we were gone for vacation and we came back and all the tomatoes were like really overgrown. And no fault to the kid across the street that I asked to water. I mean, I didn't ask him to prune, but they just exploded once I mulched all the tomatoes, which you should do. You should always mulch the ground around your tomatoes. But so we had to really do some serious heavy pruning back since we were gone for a week. So that could be it. I'm not really sure. But it could also be that it has blossom end rot. So I'm going to tell you a couple tricks in how you can cure the blossom end rot in your tomatoes. So one thing is, you can get this at Menards or Home Depot or garden stores. It's called Rot Stop. And Rot Stop is basically just calcium. So you're going to spray this on, obviously try to do it before it rains or days where it can have a little time to set in. But you're going to put this on the flowers of your tomatoes, and you're also going to put it on the actual fruit if you have fruit on the tomatoes, and you're going to put it on the foliage. Just douse it, just spray it on real quick and just go around. So it's really great because all it is calcium chloride. So very safe to consume. It's not poisonous or anything like that. Another way you could fix that problem, Epsom salts. Epsom salts also do the trick. This is a bag from my local Walgreens. What I did was I put some of this, like, I don't know, about a handful of this in one of my sprayers for my organic garden insect repellent, and I just put a little bit of that in there, and along with insecticidal soap and water, and sprayed that on all of the foliage as well. So that will also help your blossom end rot. Another thing I wanted to go over with you is, you know, sometimes you just can't control Mother Nature. Obviously, you can't control her at all. So when we were on vacation, we had tons of flooding that hit this area. And that could be another reason why you get blossom end rot on your tomatoes. And you really can't do anything about that other than to apply the rot stop or the Epsom salts, or grow greenhouse tomatoes where you can control the environment better. Another, and the last one I'm going to go over, is wormholes. And I don't really have any examples of wormholes that have gotten that have affected my tomatoes yet, thank God. It could be because we're using the insecticidal organic soap. But these are from those little indiscriminate brown moths you see flying around. And what they'll do is they'll, you know, lay their eggs and then in the tomato, and then the worm will bury its way into the tomato. So if you see any tomatoes with little tiny holes in them, pinprick holes, you want to remove those tomatoes right away, because those are obviously not salvageable. And if you let it stay on the vine too long, what's going to happen is the worm is going to work its way up and start eating your other tomatoes. So get that tomato off the vine as soon as possible, and throw it in your compost pile or the garbage, or whatever you want to do. So again, I hope this really helped you out. And again, I love tomatoes. They're near and dear to my heart, and I hope you enjoy them as much as I do. Happy gardening, everybody.